Alright, so today we're doing an LS430 2000 to 2003 that makes it a 3UZ 5-speed. In this case it's going into an IS200, a customer's using a J160 gearbox. So let's do this. Right, so as discussed, it's an LS430 2000 to 2003 that makes it a 3UZ 5-speed. If you want to know all the different types of 3UZ models for the LS, SC and GS, I'll put a link in the top there for you now. Right, so this one is going into an IS200. It is a plug-and-play unit, so we have adapted his original harness. So in this case, it's not a completely brand new built one. It is just an adapted one. So we've taken it, we've cleaned it, we've stripped it, we've repaired everything that needs repairing, replaced any connectors that are broken, and adapted it to work with the IS200. So what we're going to do today, two things. One, we're going to go through the entire layout of the harness so the customer Ross knows exactly where everything plugs in when he gets it with him. Second part is the testing. So we're going to be testing things like, for instance, the tacho signals working, etc. All right. So to start off with, we're going to do the layout, and I'm going to start at the ECU box over here. So in terms of what you have inside here to connect, you've got your 3 ECU plugs from the harness, so they plug in over there. You've then got your 2 body plugs over here, and they plug into the resin, which then adapts to the standard 2 IS200 plugs over there. We then have the tach converter, so this converts the 4-cylinder signal from the 3UZ ECU to the 6-cylinder cylinder that the IS200 is looking for. Okay, then we also have the brake light switch relay, so this imitates the signals that the ECU is looking for in relation to the brake light switch, because an IS200 manual does not have a 4-wire brake switch, which is what we need to imitate the signals for this one, so we use a relay to do that. Then lastly, you've got your 3 body plugs, so you've got your grey one, your blue one, and your black one over there. So again, all different plugs, they can only plug into one place, and that applies to everything. All right, this is just a junction, so this can be tucked inside there or over here, etc. So that just goes out of the way. Right, what you'll notice straight away is this half cut that I have here is actually an IS200 manual, and the ECU box is not designed for these newer shape wedge ECUs. So you do have 2 options. Number one, you can either undo the 4 screws at the back, pull the PCB board out, and then you can grind this whole lip off that goes all the way around, and then the ECU will fit straight in. Otherwise, you can get an IS300 ECU box, because they are designed for this shape of ECU, so it'll drop straight into one of those. All right, so that's the ECU box side done. Once you get to the end, you have your grommet, your U-shaped grommet, which slides into that cavity over there, which then seals the whole box up from the top where the lid is on. Working our way up to here, we then come to the piece of plastic that is holding the harness in place. Now this one bolts in there and there, so hopefully you still have the bolts left over from when you took the harness off. Now coming out of here, right over here, we've got injector 1 and coil 1. So obviously, remember, this is left bank, so it's looking from the driver's side. This is the left bank, that's the right bank, and this is cylinder 1, 3, 5, and 7, and that's cylinder 2, 4, 6, and 8. So just to get that out the way for you guys. Right, so coming out of here, we've got obviously injector 1 and coil 1. Then coming further up along here, we've got another breakout over here, which goes to our oil control valve for our left bank, which is over here. Then coming down, you have a little mounting point over there that'll clip onto there, or you can cable tie that onto there. That breaks out to go to the TPS for the throttle body. Also breaks out to go to the cam sensor for the front of the engine. Then the harness carries on down here, and you'll see in your cover you've got 2 holes over there. There's clips that should be in there, so you can clip the harness down nicely and keep it out of harm's way over there. Once it comes around the corner here, it's going to break out into 3 sections. First of all is your aircon pump connector. Now remember, because this is an LS430 engine that the customer has originally, he can't use that aircon pump because that has a solenoid on the back, which is controlled via an AC computer, which came originally in the LS430. So it's not controlled by the engine ECU, it's controlled by the car. So what you need to do is, if you are in that situation and you want to use aircon and you have one of our harnesses, you just need to get yourself either a GS or an SC430 aircon pump from 2000 to 2005. Well, the SC's from 01 to 05, but anyway, close enough. Or you can also get an LS400 AC pump, and that obviously runs from 98 to 2000. And I think you can even use the earlier ones because they all use the same connector, which is quite lucky. So you don't have to worry too much about there. You've obviously got to redo your aircon pipes anyway, so it's better to get one that will work from the beginning before you start doing all your pipes, just in case there are differences in the way that the pipes are orientated between the various models. So do check that out. Right, coming down here, two other splits. One is the crank, and that's going to come through the hole over there, down through there, through the other hole over there, and down to the crank sensor over there. Okay, now then we've got the oil pressure switch, which in this case is over here. In your case, Ross, it's not going to be here because you're going to have a front sump and your oil filter housing is going to be back here as well. This one will actually hit on the torsion bar that goes across the IS200, so these ones do not work. So your oil pressure switch will be facing back. That's why it breaks out over here, so it can come down through that hole, out through here, round the back there, and then plug in over there. Okay, so this is the whole front section done. So we're going to come back up to the top over here. Now it's going to make a turn to start making our U shape that's going to go around the engine like that. First thing it's going to do is just have a little bit of a gap there. We've obviously retaped everything up. Then it's going to come to the second piece of plastic over here, and that's bolted on there and there. All right, now coming out of here, we've got three different sections coming out here. So the first section at the front, that just goes to injector 3 and coil 3. Also goes to the cam sensor for the left bank. Coming further along, we have another breakout over here, and that goes to injector 5 and coil 5. You also have your noise filter. So you should have like a little noise filter bolted onto the inlet manifold that will plug into there. Just remember, there's a vacuum solenoid valve that usually sits here. You'll see we've removed the plug. The whole evap system has been removed and remapped out of the ECU, so that vacuum solenoid valve can just go in the bin. All right. Coming to the last section down here, it's going to break out and it's going to go to injector 7 and coil 7. Okay. Coming from there, we're then going to make our way down to here, so it goes open for a little bit so they can bend down, and then we end up in the piece of plastic at the back here. Now this one has two mounting points, so you can see one bolt pad over there, and then coming over here you've got another bolt over there where that bolts onto over there. Okay, right, so that's that section over there. So that's how this piece of plastic is bolted onto the back there. Coming down here, we have a little breakout which comes out the back here. Number one, you've got your earth point, so that's going to use an M6 bolt that bolts into the back of the cylinder head there. You should have had a bolt on there where you would have had to remove your harness, so that should just go straight back in over there. The M8, that's only used on the 3UZ-FE VVT-i, so you won't have any bolts or anything in there, so don't stress about that at all. Next up, coming down here, we're then going to go to your Lambda sensor, which comes down over there. So do remember that there is a metal shield that bolts onto the body, so it bolts on like there and there, and it just keeps this plug away from the exhaust. So please don't forget to make sure that that cover goes back on, all right, when you put this all in, just so that this gets protected from the exhaust. Otherwise it's not going to last long at all. It's going to melt and get way too hot there. All right, then lastly, coming out of here, we've then got the gearbox, and that makes its way around there, and obviously we're going down there where we're going to be doing the testing in a minute with that. Then in terms of what goes underneath the intake, there will be pictures at the end. You'll actually see what it looks like underneath there. But underneath there, you've got your two NOx sensors and your starter solenoid. They go into this white plastic frame. You then have your main starter cable, which comes out and does exactly what it says here. It's just going to bolt directly to the positive of the battery. Then you've got your 3-pin plug, which bolts in, plugs into the back of the plastic over there. So that's your starter solenoid and your two NOx sensors. That's where they connect to. Right, so now I'm going to move around to the other side. I'm at the limit of what I can do over here. Right, so following along here, you'll notice that almost at the end, you're going to have a little breakout section over here, and that is where your other earth strap is going to bolt to. So you get M6 bolts on the top holes there. Your M8 is not used in this particular case. What I do advise people to do is, if you have a look here, you would have normally had a piece of metal pipe that ran to the brake booster. So it came obviously from here, attached to a metal pipe, went across there, and up in the middle, I think it's about there. I don't know if you can, hopefully you can see that. It's about there, but there was an earth strap that went from there to the cylinder head on the 1G. Normally I advise people to keep that earth strap and just attach it from here, this earthing point here, straight to the firewall over there. It just helps because Toyotas love earths, and it just means another earth from the cylinder heads to there, so you're not relying entirely on the connection between the block. Because remember, your earth from your battery is going to go down, it's going to attach to the block, and that's for your starter motor. But your whole engine harness is relying on the earth through the block. Now there are metal lines, MLS gaskets, so that's a plus point. But again, if you just put an earth on there to there, you're then not fully relying on the actual earth through the block itself for the engine harness. So it's always good to have that in there. Right, so coming along here, now it's going to stop and come to an end over here. So starting, we're going to have injector 8 and coil 8. and your pedal plug. So you see that little 6-pin DTM plug comes out there, goes along there, and plugs into the pedal. So obviously this would just go around where your original accelerator cable went through. You mount the pedal inside, and then that just plugs in over there nice and easy. All right, so that's that section. Moves a little bit along forward here, and then you're breaking out and you've got your injector 6, you've got your coil 6, you've then got your acoustic control induction plug, which has a little bracket which holds it on over here. So you should have that on your engine still. And then lastly, you've got your noise filter, which again, it's just a little noise filter like this, electrical noise filter, and that plugs in and bolts on over there. Right, moving along, you're going to get to this section over here, and it's going to break out to go to your cam sensor for the right bank, injector 4 and coil 4. And just remember, you can use these mounting points over here. You can see these little screw mounting points. You can put P-clips on there, and you can keep the harness in its place over there. All right, coming to the end here, it'll break out at the very end. Then you're going to have injector 2 and coil 2. You're also going to break out for the coolant temp sensor. That's the one for the ECU. You'll see in this case, I've got a temp sensor in there. You won't have that. You'll just have a bolt in there. Nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly normal. You guys don't need to fit a secondary temp sensor with these, because the actual ECU can communicate via MPX to the dash. So the coolant will be coming directly from the ECU, which is reading from there. There's no separate gauge temp sensor on that one. Okay. Then you're also breaking out and you're coming along to your drive-by-wire throttle. So that's the 2-wire plug that goes on over there. We're also breaking out, going to the oil control valve for the right bank, so that plugs in there. And then lastly, from this little branch, it's going to break out, come along here, and go to the mass airflow sensor. All right, so just remember with the mass airflow sensors, the LS430 has this particular version with a flat plug. The GS and the SC430, they have where the plug is at a 45-degree angle. Just make sure you are aware of that. We've found electronic differences between the SC and the LS and the GS, so just make sure you get the correct mass airflow sensor. Okay, right, then the harness is going to come along down here, and it's going to break out at the bottom here towards your alternator into 3 sections. One is going to be your 3-pin plug, which goes into your alternator itself. Okay, then we've got the oil level sensor plug. So remember, because you will have a front sump over here, this is obviously going to plug into the little sensor which is in the side of the sump, and it just goes there like that. And then lastly, you've got your O2 sensor over there, and that just slides in, and you should hopefully have a little bracket on your block, and that just slides straight in there like that. Let's see if I can get that on there now. There you go, just slides in there like that, keeps it all nice and neat. All right, obviously you've got a alternator wire that you've got to put in, so this is the one that physically bolts onto the alternator. Okay, that one is then going to go down, and we're going to go around the other side to show you where that is. It's going to go down along the subframe, up the subframe, and it bolts in straight over here. All right, so this is where the standard alternator plugged into. It's a very useful spot to use because it has 120 amp fuse for the alternator. So if anything goes wrong, it'll pop the alternator and you won't have a massive short touching your subframe and so on and causing a fire. So I always advise to use that one over there. So in terms of the main power connections, obviously you've got your battery exactly like this. You've got your main starter, which is going over there. Don't forget that your fuse box has a main power that comes up there. So usually this goes under, and then your main starter goes on top of that, and that's your 2 power connections. On this side, you've got your earth cable, which is illustrated by this one over here. It goes down underneath the battery, bolts to the chassis. While you're here and the engine is out, lift this up, lift up your tray, check underneath there. There has a tendency for that to all rust away. So do make sure you have a very nice clean earth. It's just a useful thing to do now while everything is out, and make sure you're happy with that. Okay. And then the earth that goes underneath bolts on there, it goes down there. And then in our case, it's this one, which you bolted to the head, but it makes no other odds. You can just come here and bolt it to the block, either to where the mount is, or any bolt hole along there. And then remember, you can put an earth on this M8 going straight to the cylinder, straight to the firewall over there. All right. Okay, so that is the entire layout. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to do the testing. We're going to come back and then we'll get the testing done with you guys. All right, so see you in a second. Right, so we're back for the testing now. So what we're going to do is we're going to split the testing up into 2 sections. The first section we're going to do basically just with the ignition on. That's to allow us to test varied things that they should be working inside the vehicle in a plug-and-play setup. We're then going to move on and we're going to do the actual starting of the engine and all the testing required to make sure the engine is running exactly as it should do. Okay, So first of all, I'm going to break through the testing that we're going to do with the ignition on, the testing we're going to do with the engine running on, and then we'll start from there. So in terms of with just the ignition on, we're going to be testing things like the ambient temperature sensor. So that's the outside temp display on the center there. Check engine light, charge light, and oil pressure light. So those are all the lights that come on your dash. So we make sure that all of those work and come on. Then we're going to test the reverse switch. So we're just going to bridge that plug here, which is exactly what your gearbox would do. We'd get the annoying beep from the IS200 to say that the reverse circuit is working. Speedo, as per usual, we're going to feed a signal down the speed sensor plug just so that we can see the speed coming through on the dash. So we know that from the terminals at this plug all the way to the cluster, everything is fine. Then we're going to test the OBD2 machine, and what I mean by that is basically show that it's communicating. It is plugged in directly into the OBD2 plug that is in a standard location in the IS200, so there's nothing weird. We haven't added another plug or anything. It's just a boom, this one you normally use to do diagnostics. Then we're going to do the fuel pump relay, so that's using the machine. We're going to test the fuel pump relay. What I'll do is I'm going to put a link now to a video I've done explaining all the different ways that Toyota and Lexus control fuel pumps. This is an LS430. I do go through it in that particular case, so just watch that and you'll know everything that's going on there. Then we're going to test the AC system. So there's two things we're testing. One is the AC clutch. So in other words, I'm going to use the machine to tell the ECU to activate the clutch. We're going to hear the relay activate, which tells me that the ECU is controlling that relay, which then controls the AC magnetic clutch. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the live data. We're then going to check the AC request. So that's going to tell us that when I press the button inside the car, that the ECU is seeing the signal. Now, obviously, that is because we remapped the ECU to accept the MPX data from the IS200 into the 3UZ ECU and translate it correctly. Okay. Then last but not least, we're going to do the brake switch. So it's very simple. As per the layout, you'll see we have a little relay for the brake switch. Because the IS200 manuals don't have a 4-wire switch, so we've standardized the whole system. So whether you have an IS200 auto or not, we'll be using that little relay to do the brake light switch. And that will then give us the correct signals that we need for the ECU. Right, that'll then complete all the things that we're going to test with just the ignition on. Then we're going to move over to actually running the engine, and that's going to include the starter circuit. So again, nice and simple. We're just testing that when you turn the key, the car starts, and that confirms to me that everything in the ECU box there is wired correctly. ACIS, so that's the little valve at the back over here. So that should close as soon as we start it. That confirms that that's working. And I'm going to put a little link up here explaining what the ACIS or acoustic control induction system is, what it does, and what it looks like underneath there for your guys' information. Drive-by-wire test, well, that's simple enough. We're just going to rev it. It's a 3UZ, it's full drive-by-wire. There's no accelerator cables at all. So as soon as I touch this pedal, if it revs, we know everything is working. And obviously we'll have no error codes for a drive-by-wire pedal. Okay. Oil control valve test, that's nice and simple. We just use the machine to test both oil control valves on bank 1 and bank 2. You'll hear that it basically retards the cam, and your engine will sound incredibly lumpy when it does it. So you can actually hear that engine note change, and you know that the valves are working 100%. Injectors and coils, nice and simple. I'm just going to go one by one and unplug the injectors. That will then tell us that every single cylinder is firing exactly as we expect it to. So we should hear it nice and smooth, and then as I pull them out, you'll hear the misfire of each cylinder. Now then, interesting fact, the reason why I pull the injectors out and I don't just remove the coils is because if the ECU picks up a misfire on a coil when I unplug it, it actually shuts the injector off until you turn off the ECU and turn it back on again. Okay, so just be a warning for you guys, if you are doing diagnostics with these things and you're looking for a misfire, don't try and do it with the coils, because if you do pull it out, then it's going to pick up a misfire. It's then going to shut the injector down, and then you're going to put the coil back in, and then it's just going to keep misfiring because the ECU has shut the injector down. So please do bear that in mind when you are doing diagnostics, especially with these ones. Okay. Right, so that's the injector coils. Tacho, nice and simple. We're just going to go over to the thingy, make sure we're getting a rev signal through there. Remember, we've got our device that's converting it from a 4-cylinder to a 6-cylinder, so it should all be correct there. Coolant temp, again, nice and simple. We're just going to make sure that the coolant temperature gauge is actually coming off the needle and working there. And then diagnostics, I'm going to go through with you how you do diagnostics, what you can do, what you can't do, etc. Okay, so let's start off with the bits with the ignition on. So again, nice and simple. As it's a plug and play, you're going to have your key inserted in the ignition. You're going to turn it on. And again, we're going to start with the ambient temperature. So as you can see here, we've got 15 degrees. Now remember, this is a sensed temperature. Your temp sensor is at the front, at the bar that goes, the big aluminium bar that goes across just underneath there. If that temp sensor is missing, then that's not going to work. So if you get in and that doesn't work, check that that is plugged back in again, because I know sometimes you have to take it off to get all the engines out, so just remember to plug it back in before you do that. Next up, check engine, charge and oil light. Well, let's start from the top. We've got check engine light there, we've got oil light there, and we've got charge light over there. Okay, so super happy with that, everything is fine. Right, next up we're going to do reverse. So again, imitating exactly what your gearbox basically does. I'm just going to touch that together like that, and so you can hear that beep. So that tells me that the reverse circuit all the way inside the vehicle is absolutely fine. Next up, we're going to be doing speedo. So obviously, if you guys watch all my videos, you know how this works. I've got a little device here that can imitate a speed sensor signal. What I also do is, because this is a Hall effect style sensor, I've got 12 volts, I've got ground, and I've got signal. So I'm not only doing that, but I'm also using the speed sensor, all 3 wires, to make sure that the entire circuit is actually correct. So first of all, I'm just going to put this into test mode. That will then confirm that the actual positive and negative wires are 100%. Okay. So as you can see, I've now got my power and my ground plugged in, and the device is lighting up. So I know my 12 volts and my ground is working just fine. And then last but not least, my yellow wire is my signal wire. Right, so I'm going to hold it here so you can see. And as I touch there, boom, there you go. There's your speed signal coming through there. Okay, so now I know that that is absolutely perfect all the way from the terminals, not just the connector, to the cluster there. Little tip for you guys, if you guys get it, and because the engines come in and the engines come out and the gearboxes maybe get knocked around, if you put it all in and you've plugged it all in and you find your speedo's not working, a nice, quick, easy way to test and see where the problem lies is going to be using a drill. You unbolt your speed sensor from your gearbox, you pull it out, you then attach the drill, tape the drill to the speed sensor part that turns, and then effectively get your mate to jump in, turn the ignition on, you whack the drill, turn it up, and then if he sees a speed signal coming through, then clearly it's the gearbox that's the problem and it's not giving a speed signal. If he does that and no speed signal comes through, then I would assume that the actual speed sensor itself is what's at fault. Okay, so that's a nice little quick, easy test that you guys can do when you get there. Right, so that's speedo. Let's move over to the OBD2 machine now, or the diagnostic machine. So again, these do take an incredibly long time to actually load up. So I've done that already. So I'm going to go into function. I'm going to go into, hang on a second. Right, there you go, perfect. So as you can see there, it's saying LS430. So it is actually picking up that it is an LS430. We're now going to go back into the information that we need from there. Okay, data list. Let that all load up. Fantastic. Right, okay, so first thing we're going to do, we're going to test the fuel pump. So we're going to go over to active test, and you can see all the data already there displaying. So we're going to come down here, see fuel pump, relay and fuel pump. Go back and watch that video, and it'll explain exactly why those two things are there and what they mean. Okay, so now we are going to go 1, 2, 3. Okay, you may have heard that relay click. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move the camera over to where the relay is. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, fantastic. Right, so obviously this ECU controls the relay for the fuel pump, so I'm happy. You can hear the relay click and I can hear the fuel pump running as well. Right, next one, AC clutch. So again, we're going to go back into active test. AC magnetic clutch relay. Hopefully you can see all this. This light in the workshop is really blurring the screen out here. Let me see if I can get a decent angle. That looks all right. Right, so again, exactly the same thing. I'm going to move this. Now remember, the AC clutch relay is in the fuse box tray right next to the ECU box. I'm going to keep quiet now. Right, fantastic. Okay, so hopefully you heard the relay clicking there. So I'm happy that the ECU is controlling the relay, which then controls the 12 volts, the magnetic clutch on the AC pump. Right, so that's that part. Let's go over to the AC request. Now, in order to do that, I need a data list. And just so that I'm not trying to get a whole lot of data and slow everything down, I'm just going to get what is necessary. So we'll put engine speed in there. We'll put coolant temp in there. And then we want AC request. And we also want stoplight switch because that's the next one. So AC signal, yes. And stoplight switch, yes. And we'll click on OK. Right, that's perfect. Okay, so AC signal, as you can see there, so I'm going to try and hold it there where you can actually see nicely there. So you see we've got AC signal there saying off and stoplight switch saying off. I'm going to now reach inside the car and I'm going to press this button on and off like that. And then you're going to see that change. So let me try and see if I can get AC signal off, press the button, on, off, on, off. Okay. So we know that that is 100%. So as I press the button, the request is being received by the ECU and I can see that data on here. So I know that that is happening. All right. So as long as the rest of the AC system is plumbed in and wired up exactly as an IS200 is standard, everything will work 100% and the ECU will control the AC. All right. So the last one that I want to do, obviously, is the stoplight switch. So I've got to come over to here because unfortunately I did remove the brake switch on this half cut, and that's because they make wonderful clutch switches. Because a little note, the brake pedals are exactly the same as the IS300 in the US, which actually came with a manual gearbox. So if you take a look at your clutch pedals, guys, you'll notice that there's a little bolt that stops it, and if you just look on the brake pedal next to it, you'll notice that the brake switch literally would bolt directly into the clutch switch and work in the exact same way. So little hint, if you guys are running aftermarket ECUs and you want a clutch switch for things like launch control, just get another brake switch and put it into your clutch pedal and away you go, job's done. And they're super easy. The ones for the IS200 manuals are just a 2-wire one, so one side is ground and the other side goes to your ECU on digital input just to let it know that the clutch is either pressed or not pressed. All right, getting sidetracked here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take the STP or stoplight switch signal from the original IS200. I'm going to supply it with 12 volts, which is obviously what the car does on the inside because that's how your brake lights work. And then as soon as I do that, you're going to hear the relay click that we've put in. And then also you're going to see the stoplight switch is going to go from off to on. All right, so I'm going to give it 12 volts now. And there you go. So you can actually see, hopefully hear the relay. Fantastic. Okay. So I'm super happy with that. Everything in terms of obviously with just the ignition on testing is now done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to warm the engine up and I'm going to make sure that we get a coolant temp signal coming through because I can see at the moment I've got nothing at all. So I'm going to warm it up for a little bit. We're going to come back and then we're going to carry on with the testing with the engine actually running. All right, so see you guys in a second. Right, so we're coming back for the testing with the engine actually running. I've let it warm up a little bit so you can see now we've actually got some temperature here. Let me just get the light going here. So you can see we've got the needle actually coming off the bottom there. So we do have some temperature there. It's about 50 degrees. So it's hot enough that we can see that coming through there. Right, so quick recap, because obviously it's been a while since we've gone through this. So starter circuit, just turning the key to make sure it starts. ACIS, we'll make sure the valve closes down after we start it up. Drive by wire, we're going to rev the pedal. You can hear the actual throttle working already there. Oil control valve, we're going to test both oil control valves. You're going to hear the change in engine as it retards and advances the cams. If you have a quick sneak peek as I go through the test, it kind of tells you what it's doing. Injectors and coils, we're going to run around and pull all injectors and coils out one by one. We're going to come back, check the tacho and the coolant temp. Hopefully the engine's warmed up a little bit more so that coolant temp gauge will actually go up more there. Then we've got diagnostics. I'm going to go through all of that with you over there. So I'm going to put my ear defenders on because obviously very loud. Okay, so nice and simple, plug and play. You've just got to grab your keys and 3, 2, 1. Okay, so it fires up all right. Starter circuit is all good. ACIS, you can see, has gone down, so that is all good. Okay, yeah. So drive by wire test. All good. Oil control valve test. Let's go back into here. Right, we're going to do bank 1 first. See, there it tells you exactly what it's going to be doing. Okay, so you hear the change in engine note there. Go to bank 2. Okay, so that is all good. So oil control valve. Right, let's go for the injector. So we'll start here. injector 2, injector 4, injector 6, and injector 8. Right, coming back around here now. Injector 7, injector 5, let's do injector 3, and injector 1. Right, okay, so happy with that. That is the injectors. Right, so tacho, you can see we've got a signal coming through there. For you. Coolant temp, you can see, has now climbed even more than when we first started over there. So what I'm going to do now is we are going to just shut this down. Right, fantastic. Okay, so super happy with all of that. So everything's working as I expected to, so happy days there. Right, so diagnostics now. Unfortunately with the 3UZ, you cannot just bridge the two terminals in the OBD2 port. That's just something they removed for the US and the European 3UZ ECUs. Now, little caveat, it does work with a JDM ECU, so if you had like a Celsius 3UZ or like a Crown 3UZ, that little trick where you bridge the terminals and it flashes the check engine light, that would still work for you. Okay, so in this case, you need a diagnostics tool of some description in order to read codes and live data. But the bridging of the pins is not entirely useless. What you can still do is if you do bridge the pins, you'll put it into diagnostics mode. You kind of limited as to what you can do. In essence, all you can really do is check the base timing on the engine itself. So you can use a timing light on coil 1. And if you come down here, you'll see you've got 0, 5, 10, and 15 degrees. And let me just check and see if I can see where the mark is. There you go. So again, I've just obviously put white little paint or correction fluid in there just to make it really nice and visible for you guys. But there's your mark there. There's your mark over there. You can basically bridge the pin 4 and pin 13 of the diagnostics port, or pin 5 and 13. It really doesn't make a difference which one. Once you do that, it'll lock the timing at 10 degrees. You can put a timing light on there. You can check the timing, verify that it's correct because it'll be locked at 10 degrees. Just bearing in mind that if you do have a timing light like this that has an adjustable bit at the back, do make sure either you put it on 0 and then check that it's at 10, or you can put it on 10 and check that it's at 0. What I will do as well, there's a video up, I've done a video on how to check all the timing, so I'm going to put a link to that up there as well, so you guys can go and have a watch of that, and you can actually see it in real life and what it looks like. Sometimes that's more useful than anything else. But yeah, so that's basically it, fully tested, everything is working exactly as expected to, so that is fantastic. So what we're going to do, Ross, we've got to get this off, get it in a box, get it off to you. For everybody else, if you have any questions, again, feel free, comment down below, message us on Facebook, we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. And yeah, thanks for watching guys, and we'll see you again soon. Bye bye.